Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So today we celebrate the veneration of the Holy Cross. Thank you for allowing me to do the hymn in Greek. That was our fight song at Holy Cross. Holy Cross is the name of our school. So I know that hymn really well, and I always do at least that one, and the one during Pascha, I do that too. The cross is something that I believe actually binds all of the Christian world. When Paul went through his travels, he always found things that would make everybody have something in common. If you go to any or most Protestant churches, the one thing you're going to find is the cross on the wall. The cross is something that binds us all. The cross is something that brings us all together. And the cross is used throughout the generations too. We see it in movies, we see it in different things, right? What was used against the vampire? Cross. That was used against the warding off of something evil, something wicked, right? Originally, the cross, when it was introduced by Rome, they got it from another group of people, and it was a device of torture and a device of horror. It was something that instilled fear in those that would think about committing some sort of crime. The cross was something to be feared. And everybody that waited execution sat in their jail cells knowing that the impending doom was horrible, suffocation, and whatever else came with it. The cross was something that everybody feared. And when it sat upon the hill and they saw those people hanging there, it really made people think twice about what they were doing. When Jesus was crucified, he endured all those things. He endured the suffering. He endured the pain. But I want you to take a step back for a second. When Jesus was being whipped and scourged and punched and persecuted and slapped and made fun of, he lost so much blood and he sweat so much and he was so weak. Can you imagine going through that for 12 hours and then asked, and they say, and they take a guesstimate that the cross weighed about 300 pounds. Can you imagine? After enduring so much pain and suffering and then being asked to carry a 300-pound object, even if one end was being drugged, you know that that must have been hard. And he had to carry it through the whole city to the hill that was called the Skull, Golgotha. Can you imagine what was going through Jesus' mind? Can you imagine what was going through the mind of his followers? He came, he was saving people, what's going on? They were afraid. I guarantee that they were terrified. They ran from him. They ran when he got arrested. The hymns today tell us, there's a second hymn that was done, and it talks about the fiery sword, right? The fiery sword was removed from the garden. And that references what? The Garden of Eden. The garden in Eden, actually. Eden was the whole area. And there was a garden in Eden that Adam and Eve were sent over to take care of. And when they gave up their lives and death was introduced into the equation, they were kicked out of the garden and sent into the wilderness, where they had to toil and have torment and everything else as a reward. All of us have achieved and received that sinful nature. And so that they would no longer be able to enter again into the garden, there was a fiery sword placed, so no matter how they tried to get in, the sword would move and bar their way. So, where man started in the garden and ended up in the wilderness, think about what happened with Jesus. He started in the wilderness, and he was brought back into the Garden of Gethsemane. He brought us back. He brought us back into that place. He extinguished that sword and brought us back into the grace of God. There was 4 things that I want you to think about with the cross. In the cross, we have the clearest understanding of the world's guilt, right? We always look, we always wear the crosses, we always think of it, we always look to it for power, we look to it for strength. But when we look at the cross, we should also be looking at it as a culmination of the world's guilt. Can you imagine? Everybody that's ever sinned from the beginning of time, Adam and Eve, all the way up to Jesus, and then from Jesus, and we got to remember, in Revelation, Jesus says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, I am the beginning and the end. He said, he stood at the beginning and saw the end, and he stood at the end and saw the beginning. So that moment in time when he hung on the cross, he also died for every sin that we commit and are going to commit, and all the people in the future is going to commit. It's hard to fathom. It's hard to bring that reality into our mind. That tomorrow, if I sin, that he's already died on the cross, and that I have added to that torment and pain on his back. That I've added to that agony. That I am one of the people that pushed down the crown of thorns upon his head. That I was one of the people that turned and looked at the hammer in my hand as I pound the nails in the cross. Imagine that. I want you to put yourself there. That's what we're doing, is reflecting on the cross. And I also want you to think about, the second thing I want you to think about is, oftentimes we say God is love. He is. God is love. He is a just and loving God. And oftentimes we say there's no hatred there. But I ask you this question. If God did not hate sin, then why did he put his son on the cross? He hates sin. He hates it with such a passion that he sent his son as a ransom for us, to shed his blood to save us from ourselves. He hates sin. And it says it in the scriptures many times. The result, your reward of sin is death. A fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. We need to look at the things that we do and really take conscious thought about the sins that we commit, because God hates those things that we do. But boy, does he love us. He loves us. The cross is the glorious exhibition of God's love. He, even though hated sin, loved us so much that he sent his only begotten Son, that we may have eternal life. He sent his Son that we may share in the inheritance. We say it every week. We share in the inheritance. We were grafted on to the vine. We were brought into the fold. We were brought into the grace of God. And through holy confession, through the church, through the grace of God, through the communion, through all the things that we do every week and hopefully every day when we pray, we can get closer to God. That reflection of God will begin to emerge when we look in the mirror, that we do not see a reflection of sin, that we see a reflection of holiness and purity. And when we looked at the cross, the fourth thing I want to bring up is that it is a symbol of victory. It was victory. Satan tried so hard for so many years, so many generations, to thwart the plans of God. If you read Revelation, he even tried with the fallen angels to create his own seed and create that. But even from the very beginning, it was said that a virgin would conceive and she would crush the head of the serpent under her heel. And that was already being foretold from the very beginning, that the Panagia, the Virgin Mary, would give birth to Jesus Christ, and he would destroy Satan's hold over mankind. He would destroy Satan's hold over death. What do we sing every time we have Pascha, right? He destroyed death by death, trampling down death. That is the symbol of victory. It's not something that when you wear the cross around your throat, around your neck, when you see it on the wall, that you're carrying a symbol of torture, but also the greatest symbol of victory. It's both. Jesus died. And every time you go to sin, every time I go to sin, I'm not just meaning you, I'm meaning all of us. Every time we all sin, we should be grabbing a hold of that cross and saying, is it really worth it? Is it really worth me putting a little bit more pressure on the Lord that day? That's what's happening. Every time I fail, every time I sin, I'm adding a little bit more to the plate that Jesus held that day on Calvary. We look to the cross for a symbol of victory. We look to the cross as a symbol of hope. Because every time we come before the foot of the cross and allow ourselves to be crucified just a little, we can always remember that the crucifixion is not the end, but it's only the beginning. When Paul went and traveled throughout the lands, right? Corinth, when he went into to the Corinthians, they thought the cross was foolishness. They thought the crucifixion of Christ was foolish. The word medion, I believe I'm pronouncing it right, that's where we get the word, English word for moron. It was an idiocy. They thought we were morons. They thought we were idiots for believing in somebody that died. But they didn't understand. They didn't conceive the idea of the cross. To them it was foolishness. But their foolishness is our strength. To them it was weakness. But their weakness, it is our strength. Everything that we find, our biggest foolishness is God's wisest moment. It was foolishness that Christ had to be crucified. But it was not foolishness that he was crucified. The cross is the symbol of victory. It is. And every time we look on it, we need to remember what he went through. It wasn't just an idle time. Where we celebrate the day of the cross today, those that don't believe that the cross, that the foolish Christ, the foolishness of Christ was on the cross, their feast day is tomorrow. What is tomorrow? April Fool's Day. That's their feast day. That's when they can celebrate their foolishness. So today, as you prepare yourselves in your heart to receive the gift of communion, the gift of the salvation that Jesus gave, I want you to look upon the cross. And at the end, when you come up to venerate and you receive one of the flowers and some of the basil, reflect on it. And I hope that you reflect on it every day of your life. I hope that whoever doesn't have a cross on gets one. And would you think about sinning? Grab that cross, rub it in your hands, and say, is it really worth it? I ask my son that all the time. Is it really worth it, Panioti, for you to disobey me? Is it really worth it? Today, as we prepare our hearts, think about the cross. Think about how horrible it was, but also how glorious it was. Think about how much pain it caused Jesus, but how much joy it brought him as well. To give us back the inheritance that we so foolishly gave away.
Amen.